Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Trump has signed a trade deal with Indonesia and it has a message for the whole world. What Trump calls an agreement is essentially arm twisting. We'll tell you what Indonesia has got, at what price, and what are the implications for others hoping to strike deals with the US. Meanwhile, the US president's approval ratings are falling faster than his patience. His MAGA support base is disenchanted. Is this the start of a political divorce? And what's with the NATO chief's warnings over buying Russian oil? Sanctions for India, exceptions for Europe. You may call it hypocrisy. They call it SOP, Standard Operating Procedure. Also tonight, why does Trump keep batting for Boeing? What's in it for him? The Nvidia CEO is in China. Is it truce in the chip war or just a pause? In India, a special report on how the tourism sector is booming. And among the visitors is a Prada team in Kolhapur. They're there for the sandals, some damage control, and a slice of the Indian market. In West Asia, Israel is bombing Syria. Is this Netanyahu's next war or just a distraction from his mess at home? And finally, making sense of the Laboo craze. Their profits are expected to jump by 350%. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Israel bombs the Syrian army's headquarters in Damascus after warning the Syrian government to leave its Druze minority alone. The attack comes amid clashes between government troops and Druze fighters. The sectarian violence has already killed nearly 250 people. Israel views Syria's Druze minority as an ally. Iran's supreme leader says Israel wanted to quote-unquote overthrow the system in the Islamic Republic. Ayatollah Khamenei claims that this was the reason behind Israel's 12-day war with Iran last month. He also accused the Netanyahu government of trying to stoke unrest in Iran. A ceasefire between the two countries has been in place since the 24th of June. In Turkey, Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu sentenced to 20 months in prison for insulting and threatening the city's public prosecutor. İmamoğlu is the main rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. This is one of the many cases against him. His arrest in March had triggered widespread protests in Turkey. Pakistan has a new political party. It has been launched by Reham Khan, the former wife of Imran Khan. The journalist and author says that the whole of Pakistan is her constituency. She has pledged to fight for legal reforms and slammed the Shehbaz Sharif government and dynastic politics. And Cuba's labor minister resigns after downplaying poverty in the country. She claimed that there are no beggars in Cuba and people rummaging through garbage were only pretending to be poor. Her controversial remarks led to a massive uproar as communist Cuba grapples with inflation, poor wages, and food shortages.
They are going to pay 19%, and we are going to pay nothing.
I would like to congratulate you on your election as President of the United States of America.
Thank you so much.
Trade deals are supposed to level the playing field, but Donald Trump treats them as a one-way street. For him, trade deals are less about free trade and more like a protection racket, a tool to extract concessions. Case in point, his deal with Indonesia. Yesterday, the US president made an announcement. He said he's made a deal with Indonesia.
So we made a deal with Indonesia. I spoke to their really great president, very popular, very strong, smart. And we made the deal. We will pay no tariffs. So they are giving us access into Indonesia, which we never had. That's probably the biggest part of the deal. And the other part is they are going to pay 19%, and we are going to pay nothing.
They will pay 19% and we will pay nothing. Those words say it all. This deal is clearly one-sided and it should bother the whole world. First, let's give you the specifics. Indonesian goods will be taxed at 19% in the US. In other words, the US will impose a 19% tax on imports from Indonesia. In addition to that, Indonesia will buy US oil and gas worth $15 billion. US agricultural produce worth $4.5 billion and US aircraft, that's 50 Boeing jets. Indonesia will have to buy all of this from the US. And they will also face a 19% tariffs on the goods that they sell. Earlier, Trump had threatened a 32% tariff on the Indonesians. From 32, he has come down to 19%. It's a lower rate of tariff. But look at the trade-off. And this tariff, 19%, this lower tariff, is still almost 4 times higher than last year. In 2024, Indonesian imports in the US were taxed at 5% on average. But now with this new deal and the so-called concession, Trump is raising the tariffs to 19%. Is Indonesia complaining? Well, their president isn't. His name is Prabowo Subianto. He spoke after Trump's announcement and he sounded relieved.
Thank God. Although the negotiation was quite tough, we understood the interests of the United States, and they also understood our interests. We agreed on the tariffs now from 32% down to 19%. I will keep negotiating, and I would say Donald Trump is quite hard to negotiate with.
So there's a mutual understanding, and Subianto is not done yet. He wants to keep negotiating with the US. He sees this deal more like a temporary reprieve and not the final agreement. And you can understand why he agreed to this deal. The US is Indonesia's second largest export market. Americans buy all kinds of goods from there, from apparel to palm oil, even electronics, footwear and cosmetics. They buy it from Indonesia. Indonesia is among America's top 25 trade partners. Last year, it shipped goods worth $28 billion to the US, so the stakes were high. Also, jobs from these industries were on the line. Higher tariffs would have hit exports, and this in turn would have hit employment in Indonesia. In fact, the strain had already started to show. The trade war forced Indonesia to slash its growth forecast. The earlier projection was 5.2%. Jakarta brought this down to 5% growth forecast. And even after this deal, Indonesia's economy is not out of the woods. The 19% tariff rate will hurt growth. It could reduce exports to the US by a quarter, wiping out around 0.3% of Indonesia's GDP. So was this deal even worth it? What does Indonesia get for its concessions, for its purchase orders, and for buying new Boeing jets from the US? At best, this is limited relief. Yes, Indonesia avoids the harshest tariffs. It secures access to an important market. But all of this comes at a hefty cost. Indonesia is allowing American goods to be sold tariff-free in their country, and world leaders would be watching all of this closely. Because this could be a template. This deal gives an insight into Trump's thinking. It shows what he really wants from his trade war. His strategy is clear. First, threaten high tariffs, shock and awe. Then offer a less painful deal. It may look like a concession, but it's still worse from where you began, and better from what you could suffer. Plus, you'll have to buy American goods that you may or may not need. That is the template that Trump wants to follow. He says the US is on the brink of announcing more deals, including a trade pact with India.
India basically is working along that same line. We're going to have access into India. And you have to understand, we had no access into any of these countries. Our people couldn't go in. And now we're getting access because of what we're doing with the tariffs.
So the US is closing in on a deal with India. Talks with the European Union are also moving forward. Both of them will study this Indonesia deal carefully because it carries a message. Yes, Donald Trump wants a trade deal, but you may end up paying for it with higher tariffs, with large purchases of American products, and almost no room to maneuver. This is not free trade. This is coercion, loosely packaged as negotiation. It's been 177 days since Donald Trump became president, since he promised a golden age for America. But things are not going to plan. His approval ratings are in free fall. Consumer prices are rising in the US and his support base is rebelling against him. So how did so many things go wrong so quickly? Let's look at the ratings first. After inauguration, Trump's approval was at 49%. By mid-February, it reached its peak, which is 50%. Then in April, Trump announced his reciprocal tariffs. And since then, it's been like a bungee jump. It's fallen to 41% in the latest poll. 41% approval ratings, that's a considerable drop from the peak. But the drop itself is not surprising. Most presidents lose popularity after taking office. What stands out in this case is the pace at which it has happened. Compare Trump to his predecessors. Around the same time in office, Joe Biden had 50% approval. Barack Obama had 59%. George Bush had 56%. But Donald Trump is at 41%. And here's the problem with Donald Trump. He always overpromises. Inflation, gone on the first day. Ukraine war, ended in 24 hours. Epstein files, released immediately. Now, we're not saying that other politicians do not exaggerate, but Trump takes it to a whole new level. So naturally, the expectations are higher. And when he doesn't deliver, the backlash is also bigger. Consider the case of consumer prices. Trump was elected on the promise of bringing down inflation. But US inflation is rising. It reached 2.7% last month. That is up from 2.4% the month before. And this is the highest inflation since February this year, 2.7. The reason? A trickle-down effect of Donald Trump's tariffs. Compare this to what Trump said on the campaign trail.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? With your vote tomorrow, I will end inflation.
Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Some of his other moves are alienating his base, the so-called MAGA coalition. MAGA stands for Make America Great Again, MAGA. It was coined by Donald Trump himself during his 2016 campaign. Back then, MAGA was made up of American conservatives. But now it's a much bigger coalition. Even tech bros and technocrats have joined in. And some of them are not happy. The first crack was the big, beautiful bill. It's a spending proposal backed by President Trump. It has been passed now. Now, this will raise the US debt by $3 trillion. Again, this is not what he promised. Way back in 2016, Trump promised to eliminate US debt in 8 years. But as president, he has added $7.8 trillion to it. He's now slated to add another 3. Which is why Elon Musk abandoned him, arguably the biggest exit from the MAGA coalition, Elon Musk. Then came the fight with Iran. Trump had promised to end foreign wars, yet he almost started one with Iran last month, which led to more rebellion. Prominent MAGA ideologues began speaking out, like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Steve Bannon. They questioned President Trump's unwavering support for Israel. Then came another U-turn. This time on Ukraine. Trump had promised to end the fighting on day 1 in office. In fact, even before that.
Before I even arrive at the Oval Office, shortly after we all together win the presidency, we will have the horrible war between Russia and Ukraine settled. It will be settled. The war is going to be settled.
So Trump promised to end the war before entering the Oval Office. Well, it's been 177 days since he entered it, and he has given Russia another 50 days. Forget ending the war, he is now actively arming Ukraine. Which brings us to the latest crack in MAGA, the Epstein fiasco. Trump allies had consistently pushed conspiracy theories on it. They said Jeffrey Epstein had been killed in prison. They claimed that there was a list of his prominent clients, and if Trump was elected, they promised to release that list of Epstein's clients. Attorney General Pam Bondi said that the list was on her table. FBI Chief Kash Patel said Trump would release it, and FBI's deputy chief went a step ahead. He claimed that he saw the files that confirmed Epstein's murder. Now, after all this build-up came the letdown. Trump's Justice Department published a memo this month. And what does it say? No murder, no client list. This has triggered major backlash against President Trump. Prominent Republicans are speaking out, like House Speaker Mike Johnson. He says everything should be put out in public. Even Trump's daughter-in-law is breaking ranks. She's urging more transparency from the White House. And what is President Trump saying? He says the whole thing is boring and sordid.
But I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. It's pretty boring stuff. It's sordid, but it's boring. And I don't understand why it keeps going. I think really only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going.
It wasn't boring during the campaign, but now it's fake news. Of course, there are two possibilities here. A, Trump himself is on the list, which is why he's trying to hide the details. Or B, there is no list. Trump's own conspiracy theories are coming back to haunt him. And that is the key takeaway here. Trump himself made those exaggerated promises. He himself peddled those conspiracy theories. He himself promised to end complicated wars on day one. So this rebellion is entirely of Donald Trump's own making. The good news is he has no more elections to run, so popularity is not a big worry for him. The bad news is his legacy is being dragged through the mud.
Slam secondary sanctions on you of 100%.
The West is back to lecturing the world again. NATO's Secretary General is visiting America. His name is Mark Rutte. After weeks of appeasement, he's finally had a breakthrough. He has managed to convince US President Trump to keep supplying weapons to Ukraine. And Rutte is capitalizing on that success. He has trained his guns on countries like India now. He's complaining about India's trade with Russia. Yesterday, in the presence of American lawmakers, the NATO chief issued a threat. Listen to this.
Listen. If you are the president of China, or the prime minister of India, or the president of Brazil, and you are still trading with the Russians and getting the oil and the gas in, and you sometimes even resell it for a higher price, know that if this guy in Moscow doesn't get serious about peace talks, I will slam secondary sanctions on you of 100%.
This is straight out of the Brussels playbook. Mark Rutte wants to quote-unquote slam sanctions on India, China and Brazil because apparently sovereignty is negotiable when Europe snaps its fingers. And we've all heard this before, the veiled threats and the virtue signaling. This is not new, but this time the volume is up. He wants the leaders of Brazil, China and India to pick up the phone, call Vladimir Putin and press him to get serious about peace. Of course, he's calling it advice, because nothing says diplomacy like a Dutch lecture on who should talk to whom. But here's the reality check. India, China and Brazil are doing what responsible governments do. They're protecting their people. They're buying affordable energy to keep prices stable at home. And Europe? Europe is doing the exact same thing, except with hypocrisy. While Europe preaches sanctions, it is quietly wiring billions to Moscow for oil and gas. Let me show you the numbers. Last year alone, Europe spent 22 billion euros on Russian fossil fuels. That's 16% more than what they sent to Ukraine in financial aid. 16% more was sent to Russia to buy oil. And no, they have no plans to stop. It's been 3 years since Russia attacked Ukraine, but Brussels has not dared to impose a total energy ban. In fact, it keeps pushing the can further down the road. You know when Europe wants to stop buying Russian oil? By 2027. That's what the EU proposed last month. Proposed. This is only a proposal. It may or may not pass because EU nations themselves are divided on this. Last month, Hungary and Slovakia blocked new sanctions on Russian energy. They said they cannot afford to give it up. And they made it clear that they will not follow the timetable of Brussels. That is the reality of Europe. It keeps buying Russian energy to keep their economies safe, but it lectures countries like India for doing the same thing. And this is not just geopolitics. This is common sense. The developing world needs affordable energy. It helps control inflation. It keeps growth steady. It protects the most vulnerable people from sharp price hikes. But NATO chief Mark Rutte did not care to acknowledge that. He dressed up his statement as advice, but this is a convenient distraction from NATO's own failings. While Rutte lectures others, NATO has failed to contain Russia, the very purpose for which NATO was created. They failed to deliver. Russian forces are expanding strikes on Ukraine, and Moscow is defying Trump's calls for a ceasefire. NATO's so-called deterrence has done nothing to stop it. Even the alliance's motto of collective defense looks shaky. If there's a ceasefire tomorrow, not all NATO members will step up to enforce it. And that undercuts NATO's own credibility. Plus, they have Donald Trump. He has exposed their weaknesses further. Until last year, NATO members struggled to meet their 2% spending target. They had to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. That was the target, and they struggled to meet it. This year, they have agreed to raise it to 5%. But the fact is, NATO still needs American arms to defend itself. 64% of arms imported by European NATO members come from the United States, 64%. So NATO faces some clear challenges. It is failing to deter Russia. It cannot fight without American weapons, and it is unable to speak in one voice. So here's our advice to the NATO chief. Instead of lecturing others and talking about slamming sanctions, look within and put your own house in order first. And staying with Trump's tariffs and deals, all of them seem to have one thing in common, or rather, one company in common, and that is Boeing. Wherever Trump goes, Boeing follows. Is this some sort of a new nexus? And if so, how does it impact global aviation? First, let's unpack the trend. We spoke about Indonesia's deal with the US. That deal includes 50 Boeing jets, 50 jets. Indonesia will have to buy these planes from America. That is the deal. In the month of May this year, Donald Trump traveled to West Asia, and in Qatar, he announced a multi-billion-dollar deal. Again, guess who was part of it? Boeing. Qatar agreed to buy more than 200 Boeing planes. Another deal was struck in Saudi Arabia. The kingdom agreed to buy 30 Boeing 737 planes. And finally, you have the UK. British Airways ordered 32 Boeing Dreamliners. That too shortly after the US-UK trade deal. So the trend is pretty clear and consistent. Trump is pushing Boeing sales as part of the trade package. He is almost blackmailing countries to buy Boeing jets. The question is why? Well, it could be a pure business decision. Boeing is a flagship American company, and aerospace is a key job creator for the US economy. More than 2 million Americans work in this sector. So more orders equals more jobs. But with Donald Trump, nothing is ever that simple. The president has a background in the aviation industry. In the 1990s, he had his own airline. It was called Trump Shuttle. And he's said to have many friends in this industry, including Boeing's former CEO. That friendship came in handy in 2018 and 2019. You may remember what happened back then. 2 Boeing 737 planes crashed in succession. Regulators across the world decided to ground that model. But guess who did not initially? the United States. Boeing CEO spoke to President Donald Trump. He assured Trump that the planes were safe to fly, so the US did not ground this model. And all of us know what happened later. The problem was indeed with Boeing, and Washington had no choice but to ground the planes. But what does this episode tell you? It does seem like Trump has a soft spot for this company. At one point, he was haggling with them for a new Air Force One, because he badly wanted a new Boeing jet. And the love continues in his second term in office. Earlier this year, Trump ordered a 6th-generation fighter jet. And who got the contract? No surprises. Boeing. So this is not a normal government-business relation. There's clearly more at play, which makes you wonder, what does it mean for global aviation? Well, this industry, global aviation, is a duopoly. America's Boeing makes up 40% of the airline market. France's Airbus makes 56%. Together, Boeing and Airbus sell almost all commercial planes in the world. And yes, there's a rivalry too. Consider the tariff war between Europe and the US. Trump has threatened 30% tariffs on Europe. In response, Brussels has prepared tit-for-tat measures. And among the target companies is Boeing. So this is very much a strategically sensitive industry. It gives you leverage, but it's also an easy target. Just look at what China did. When Trump threatened tariffs, China targeted Boeing. They cancelled all Boeing deliveries. Instead, the Chinese turned to Airbus. Reports say Airbus could set up a plant in China. In exchange, China will place a mega order. It is said to be worth tens of billions of dollars. Now, hearing all of this may sound worrying. After all, planes are not just any other machine. They transport millions of people around the world. So is this duopoly healthy? And is there an alternative at all? It's clear that this system is not working, because right now there's a shortage of airplanes in the world. Again, I have numbers from 2019 to 2024. Around 7,000 planes were delivered to airline companies, 7,000 planes in 5 years. This was way below the requirement, because the projection was 12,000 planes. So what's causing the shortage? You've got supply chain disruptions, you've got shortage of skilled labor, and of course, you've got geopolitical tensions. All of this has contributed to the delays. Boeing has a backlog of 11.5 years. Airbus has a backlog of 10 years. So clearly, they're unable to keep up with the demand. And what about the alternatives? Well, there are some smaller players in the market, like Brazil's Embraer, Canada's Bombardier, and China's state-run Comac. Can they break this aviation duopoly? Not anytime soon. The barriers to entry are too high, meaning you have to spend a lot of money to set yourself up. Things like factories, equipment, and clearances, you need all of that. And even if you do all of that, it's tough to create a brand. Just think about it. Chinese goods already have a bad name in the market. People hesitate to buy Chinese phones. So will airlines buy Chinese planes? Or will they go with established names like Airbus? Unfortunately, this is the reality of the aviation industry. Boeing and Airbus have too big a head start. They can delay, they can fail, they can lie, but airlines have no option but to turn to them. Donald Trump may not have ended the Ukraine war, but he has paused the chip war. That's the global battle for semiconductors, and guess who's benefiting? Chip giant Nvidia. Their CEO, Jensen Huang, is in China. It's a victory come flattery tour. Huang met top Chinese officials in Beijing. He also visited a supply chain expo in the city, and everywhere he went, he sang praises of China's technology. Listen to this.
China is moving incredibly fast because The model layer with DeepSeek and Alibaba QN and Moonshot, Kimi, right? All excellent technologies. And in fact, DeepSeek is the world's first open source reasoning model. And it was a breakthrough, no question.
The products that are manufactured here in China are unimaginable, really. It is not possible without a sophisticated supply chain. And so that's why I'm here, to celebrate the miracle of the supply chain in the China supply chain.
And he did not stop there. Jensen Huang called China's AI tech a catalyst for progress. Like I said, it's flattery on steroids. But why? Because Nvidia wants to sell chips in China, specifically the H20 chip. Some quick background here. The US-China chip war flared up under Joe Biden. In 2023, Biden announced restrictions on chip sales to China. You couldn't sell advanced semiconductors or advanced chips to Beijing. Why? Because the US wanted to retain its lead. Washington feared that China would use these chips in military equipment or maybe build advanced AI platforms with American chips. So in 2023, the Americans banned such sales. And this was a big setback to Nvidia. They got around 13% of their revenue from China, so the company came up with a solution. They made a chip especially for China, the H20, that's what they made. The H20 is not advanced enough to be banned. At the same time, it's good enough to create demand. Just one problem though. In April this year, Donald Trump banned the H20 as well. He said Nvidia cannot sell this chip to China. And since then, we've seen multiple rounds of talks. China flexed their muscles too. They curbed the export of rare earth magnets to the US. These are key to making all sorts of things. From fighter jets to mobiles to cars, you need rare earths for all of these. China has a near monopoly on these rare earth magnets. And they leverage this monopoly to bring Trump to the talking table. And it worked. Last month, he struck a trade deal with the Chinese. Trump allowed Nvidia to sell H20 chips to China, and in return, China relaxed the rare earth curbs. Which brings us to present day. Nvidia has announced that it will resume selling H20 chips to China, but many US politicians are not happy about this. They feel that the ban should have continued. Of course, the White House is pushing back. They say the H20 is not cutting edge. They claim it's only the fourth best semiconductor, and therefore, there is nothing to worry. Now, this raises two questions. A, what does this mean for Nvidia? And B, what does it mean for the chip war? For Nvidia, of course, this is good news. The H20 ban was starving them of more money. They were missing out on almost $10 billion in sales. Now, reports say Jensen Huang himself lobbied Trump. He visited the White House last week. He is said to have urged Trump to lift the ban. And frankly, this is turning out to be a great time for Nvidia. First, they hit $4 trillion in value, $4 trillion. Now they unlock the Chinese market. So for Nvidia, it's going great. Which brings us to the second question. What does it mean for the chip war? Has it officially ended? Well, that depends on three factors. Number one, Trump's trade war with China. If it flares up again, Trump may reverse his decision. He may ban the H20 sales again. Number two, the internal policy tussle in America. American politicians are mostly China hawks. They would like to see a ban on chip sales to Beijing. But US companies, they see China as a lucrative market. It's a question of who can prevail on the president, the politicians or the companies. This time, Jensen Huang has succeeded, but in future, who knows? And finally, the third factor, China's long-term strategy. When Biden banned chip exports, Beijing turned inwards. They began building their own advanced chips. But now the ban is lifted. So will China continue building their own, or will they go back to depending on the US? Knowing China, they will do the former. They will build their own. Beijing cannot rely on Trump's mood swings. They will want a reliable pipeline of chips. So as things stand, this appears to be a short pause in the chip war, a break, not peace. Our next story is from Syria. A few hours back, Israeli planes conducted airstrikes in the heart of Damascus, the Syrian capital. Once again, Benjamin Netanyahu is at the center of this fight. Israel has confirmed that it struck a military target near the Syrian presidential palace. Earlier, it hit the headquarters of Syria's military.
قصف جديد مبنى هيئة الأركان خالص. قصف جديد يا شباب، قصف خذونا بسرعة بسرعة بسرعة بسرعة بسرعة بسرعة.
إذا استهداف مبنى هيئة الأركان بشكل كامل.
قصف ثاني. دمروه.
So 2 major strikes in a matter of hours. It is a dramatic escalation in a region that's already gripped by multiple conflicts and flashpoints. Reports say the strike on Syrian military headquarters was severe. The pictures are quite dramatic. The strike collapsed 4 floors and ruined the building's facade. Reporters on the ground in Damascus captured these strikes live on their cameras. They heard Israeli warplanes circling the skies and their cameras caught the moment the planes hit. Syrian state media says at least 1 civilian was killed. The situation is still fluid. Updates are still coming in, so these numbers could change. But throughout this week, there have been clashes in Syria. More than 200 people have been reported dead so far. So what exactly is happening there? Why is Israel striking targets inside Syria? Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says he is defending the Druze community. This is an Arab sect, the Druze. Around 1 million people identify as its members. They are spread out in Israel, Syria, and Lebanon. This conflict began 4 days ago when dozens were killed in clashes between the Syrian regime and Druze militias. Syrian forces moved in to restore control. That intervention drew Israel into the fight. Netanyahu says Israel has a duty to protect the Druze. Israel's defense minister has also spoken about this. He has warned, and I'm quoting, "The painful blows have only begun." Here's a report.
Benjamin Netanyahu has found a new battlefield. Today, the Israelis struck an area close to Damascus, the capital of Syria. News cameras caught the precise moment of the strike.
شباب قصف قصف يا شباب خذونا على الهواء. شباب قصف بسرعة. بسرعة يا شباب. يا شباب خذونا على اللايف. يا شباب قصف جديد.
Israel had targeted the military headquarters of the Syrian regime. Soon after the strike, Israel's defense minister declared, "The painful blows have begun." Syrian state media reported several injuries from what it called Israeli occupation raids. The strikes came amid a new wave of sectarian violence, this time centered on Syria's Druze minority. Dozens were killed earlier this week in Soweto. This is a city situated close to Syrian border. Clashes broke out between government loyalists and Druze militias. That's when Syrian forces moved in, and Israel decided to intervene. Netanyahu says he won't tolerate the threats to the Druze.
My brothers, the Druze citizens of Israel, the situation in Sweden, the situation in southwestern Syria is very serious. The IDF is operating, the Air Force is operating, other forces are operating. We are acting to save our Druze brothers and to eliminate the regime's gangs.
The Druze make up just 3% of Syria, an offshoot of Shia Islam. Their position is precarious. They are caught between the Syrian regime, militias, and now Israeli bombs. Dozens of people have been killed so far. The trigger was a series of kidnappings. They involved the Druze community and Syria's Bedouin tribal groups. Both Israel and Syria have sizable Druze minorities. In Israel, they serve in the military. After the fall of Bashar al-Assad, Israel has offered to protect the Druze in Syria. That forms the backdrop of today's strikes. But this latest war raises deeper questions. Netanyahu is on trial at home for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Critics say he's expanding these wars to cling to power. After Gaza, Lebanon, and Iran, it's now Syria. Even the United States has called the escalation worrisome. Washington urged Israel to pull back. But today, Israel warned it would strike harder if Syrian forces stayed in Druze areas. The strategy is familiar. Escalate abroad to shore up support at home. Frame it as defending a vulnerable minority, while expanding Israel's footprint across the region. For the people of Syria, it's another war they didn't choose. For the Druze, it's another chapter in their long ordeal. And for Netanyahu, it's another gamble, betting that another war will save his position. Even as scrutiny grows at home, Syria has become the latest stage in Benjamin Netanyahu's fight to remain in power.
Once upon a time, India dressed the world. Indian textiles were the definition of luxury. By the 17th century, Indian fabrics accounted for over a quarter of global trade. It was among the most desired global commodities. British tailors literally cut up saris to keep up with the demand. Chicken curry, zardozi, bandhani, you name it, and we exported it. Then came colonization. The British broke the craft, they looted and plundered, but India did not give up. Since independence, we worked hard to revive it, and it hasn't been easy, especially when global brands take inspiration without giving credit. Take Prada, for example, and look at what they showcased at the Milan Fashion Week. Open toe-ring leather sandals. The models wore them on the runway. Prada called them heritage-inspired. They did not mention the price tag, but the sandals could go for as much as $1,000 or $1,200, which is almost 1 lakh Indian rupees. That's the estimate. And for Prada, this price is not really outrageous. It is in line with their other items. But here's the problem. These sandals are not just heritage-inspired, they're copies. They look exactly like India's Kolhapuri chappals, which sell for as little as 1,000 to 4,000 rupees. So social media erupted with backlash. There were accusations of cultural appropriation, of how Prada stole the design. Hashtags like Kolhapuri were trending, and just like that, the sandal became a scandal. Within a week, Prada blinked. It issued a statement acknowledging the quote-unquote influence of traditional Indian craftsmanship. It was like a PR bandage on the wound. And now Prada has gone one step further. Its team has flown down to Kolhapur in India.
Hi, Vinesh and Rohit. He's on our pickup footwear. Andre. Yeah. You need more of it? Later.
We do supply to many countries as well, UAE, Dubai, Australia.
This is a 4-member technical team. They met with artisans. They sat cross-legged in workshops. They watched people stitch the shoes. And this is an important exercise. To the untrained eye, Kolhapuris are humble leather footwear, but to historians, they are a living archive. Their earliest designs date back to the 12th century. They were first crafted by Dalit cobblers. In the early 1900s, they found royal patronage. But post-independence, the charm wore thin. Today, around 5,000 artisans remain in Kolhapur. They earn as little as 400 rupees a day. Leather costs have surged. Synthetic knockoffs have flooded the market. In 2019, the Government of India awarded it a GI tag, a geographical identification tag that links a product to its place of origin, that basically protects its name and essentially gives it a unique identity and legal protection. That's what a GI tag does. So 6 years back, the Kolhapuri chappals were GI tagged, but even that did not help. Also, this is not the only Prada team visiting Kolhapur. Another high-profile delegation is due in August. This includes Prada's global business head and its communications chief. And that's when the real negotiations will begin. Prada is talking about collaboration, highlighting the artisans at the center of this craft. But what is this initiative really about? Is Prada seeking cultural forgiveness, or brand redemption, or a share in India's booming luxury market? What are they here for? Chances are it's the last one. India is one of the fastest growing luxury markets in the world. Currently, it is worth around $10 billion. By 2030, it is expected to reach $85 billion. So global luxury is making a beeline for India. They're appointing Indian celebrities as brand ambassadors. They're holding fashion shows here. They're even Indianizing their products, like a Bulgari Mangalsutra or the Louis Vuitton Rani Pink footwear. In 2024, Swiss watch sales in India grew by 20%, and that's because of India's rising affluent demographic. By 2027, the number of millionaires in India is set to increase by 69%. They have a higher spending power and the willingness to spend. So brands are sitting up and taking notice. Prada is talking collaboration. But what will a real collaboration look like? Kolhapur is located in the Indian state of Maharashtra. They have proposed a few options like co-branding, profit sharing, and even a legal agreement to protect Kolhapuri artisans. Prada, to its credit, has responded positively. If done right, this could set a precedent. Because inspiration is easy. What's harder and far more powerful is giving credit where it's due. For a long time, India's tourism story was all about potential. It was either too big or too chaotic or too undermarketed, but now the story has flipped, it seems. India is not just a place that tourists dream about. India is a place where they land and explore. The tourism numbers are soaring, the airports are packed, the heritage sites are swamped, from domestic platforms making millions to global hotel chains fighting for a foothold. Everyone wants a piece of India's travel boom. Our next report tells you more.
If India's tourism story used to be one of untapped potential, it's now turned into a live-action blockbuster. In 2024, India's travel and tourism industry hit a market value of $22.47 billion. By 2033, that is projected to rise to $38.12 billion. The airports are crowded. The heritage sites are swarmed. Domestic booking platforms are pulling in multi-million-dollar profits and global investments. So India's tourism has taken off. The only question now is, can it sustain this flight? First, let's look at what is fueling the boom. For now, it's both domestic and international tourists. But the growth is being driven primarily by domestic tourism, Indians traveling within India. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, domestic travel spending outpaced international spending between 2019 and 2023. Rising disposable incomes, an ever-growing middle class, cheap flights, and Instagram are making wanderlust contagious. International arrivals are bouncing back hard too. They were up 124% in 2023, hitting 1.92 crore visitors. That's the latest data which is available. It shows that foreign exchange revenues rose 15.6% to 1.71 lakh crore rupees. But the real story here is the local appetite for seeing one's own country. So which parts of India are everyone flocking to? There are the familiar favorites: Goa, Kerala, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Delhi, West Bengal, and Punjab. Most of them host the lion's share of international footfall, bolstered by better airports, luxury hotels, and connectivity. But there are some new rising stars. The first is Uttar Pradesh. Over 317 million domestic tourists in 2022. It's a pilgrimage paradise with Ayodhya, Mathura, and Varanasi drawing in religious crowds. Then, there is Tamil Nadu. It's a magnet for both domestic and international tourists. Over 1 million foreign visitors in 2023. Gujarat is also climbing the ranks fast. This is due to megaprojects like the Statue of Unity and big bucks flowing into tourism infrastructure. Global brands are also taking notes of this boom. Marriott just launched its new series by Marriott brand in India first. Hilton plans to multiply its India presence significantly in the next decade. Booking.com, Riyadh Air, and Royal Jordanian have all listed India as a priority growth market. So, the boom is real, but so are the bottlenecks. The first problem is overcrowding. Iconic sites like the Taj Mahal and Jaipur's fort struggle with massive footfall and limited management. Then, there are infrastructure gaps and safety issues. Inconsistent roads, public transport, sanitation, and women's safety still plague many top destinations. Third, there are connectivity issues. Domestic carriers are cutting routes and struggling with operational issues, even amid rising demand. Finally, there is red tape. Visa delays, rigid regulations, and lack of multilingual signage can still frustrate foreign visitors. So, can India become a global tourism hub? The answer is yes. By 2034, tourism's contribution to India's GDP could double to 43.25 lakh crore rupees. But for India to truly become a tourism superpower, it needs to fix the experience. Every traveler leaves with a story. For India, the opportunity isn't just to cash in, it's to reshape the global narrative.
It's got matted hair, a jagged row of gremlin-like teeth, and beady little eyes. As figurines go, it's not exactly adorable, it's not cuddly, not elegant, not even remotely polite looking, and yet it has the internet hooked. People are queuing up for it. They're unboxing it on reels, they're dangling it from their handbags, many are even fighting to get their hands on one. Meet the Laboo. It's the internet's newest fixation, and the company behind it is thriving. It is a Chinese toy firm named PopMart. Its profits are expected to jump by 350% this year, 350%, all because of one weird doll. So what explains this phenomenon? Why is the internet so obsessed with the Laboo? We'll start from the beginning. Laboo was imagined by Hong Kong-born artist named Kassing Leung. As a kid, he was obsessed with moody Scandinavian fairy tales, so in 2015 he created The Monsters, a series of storybooks populated by weird elves. These elves were Laboobos. Monsters that meant well, but caused chaos. In 2019, Leung partnered with PopMart. They turned the characters into collectible figurines. The sales were decent, but this year they exploded. Like I said, profits are projected to shoot up by 350%. Revenues have tripled. And PopMart is currently valued at $40 billion, 40. So what's the secret sauce? Well, it's actually a very old sales tactic, artificial scarcity. You see, the Laboo comes in different variations, different colors and costumes, even seasonal variants. These dolls are typically sold in blind boxes, and that means one thing. You don't know which one you're buying until you've bought it and opened it. It's almost like a thrill every time. If you're lucky, you might even unbox a secret variant. There's a 1 in 72 chance that you could get a secret variant. 1 in 72, that's the same odds as being struck by lightning. And that's why people want it. More importantly, it's not even kids who are buying, it's kidults, meaning millennials and Gen Z adults. They are the fastest growing age demographic for toys, believe it or not, and this has left retailers swamped online. Stores have had to pause their sales because of high demand. People are selling these dolls on the black market. On resale sites, rare Laboobos can fetch hundreds of dollars. In Beijing, a life-size doll sold for $150,000. One doll, $150,000. On eBay, fakes have flooded the market. They're lovingly called lafufus, the fakes. Meanwhile, Chinese officials have seized over 46,000 counterfeit Laboobos. It is crazy, but it's not really new. Blind boxes have been popular forever. You don't know what you're getting, and the not knowing is the whole point. That is the USP. In Japan, they have the gachapon machines. In America, there were cereal box toys. McDonald's had Happy Meals. So this trick has long existed. And yet the Labubu craze is different because it's happening in the age of TikTok and social media. And the Labubu is not alone in this trend. There used to be fidget spinners. Everyone was spinning them dangerously enough to take an eye out. There were the Stanley Cups. They looked like industrial drinkware, but soon became a hydration staple. Drinking water normally was not an option anymore. And in all these cases, the product is beside the point. The brand is the vibe. And here's the funny part. The world is obsessed with a miniature goblin. And all for what? To disappear at the back of your shelves this time next year. Because that's the thing about internet trends. They become mainstream to cringe in 3 social media cycles. Trends like these come and go, and yet every single time we fall for it. We collect Laboobos like our lives depend on it. We tell ourselves it is special. The fact is it's not. It's a semi-ugly looking goblin with a funny name. And while you spend hundreds of dollars, at least you have a cuddly creature to hold if you go broke. So sure, join the hype if you want to. Just don't be surprised, because the next year, the only thing your Laboobu will collect is dust. Everyone keeps asking, what if artificial intelligence takes over? We say it already has. Do you know why? Because now there is an AI Appreciation Day. That's right. A day to appreciate artificial intelligence. Let me put that in perspective. It took us centuries to create a Mother's Day, even more to create a Teacher's Day. But guess who gets a day within months of popping up? ChatGPT. If this isn't proof of the AI age, I don't know what is. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Iceland's volcano spews lava. In the 12th eruption since 2021, artists carved the image of a green pope in a field in northern Italy. And a robot relay race kicks off at the Great Wall of China. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1945, the United States tested the world's first atomic bomb. The explosion was the culmination of the secretive Manhattan Project, headed by Robert Oppenheimer. The next month, 2 atomic bombs were dropped in Japan, thus ending the Second World War. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.